The other issue which Mkhonto sees the National High Command resolved on is to strongly condemn Mr. Ramaphosa's misguided decision to extend the invitation to Zelensky, the puppet president of Ukraine. The MK views this move as a clear alignment with European and Western imperialist interests and an affront to South Africa's historical position of non-alignment and anti-imperialism. Accordingly, Mkhonto will formally oppose any official visit of Zelensky to South Africa, and we will stage protest against the visit of Zelensky into South Africa. We do not want him to come because he has been a puppet of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization-led militarism, which sought to destabilize Eastern Europe and possibly the entire world. Now, the other question is, I think the national chair has dealt with the question about how do you characterize the economic freedom fighters. I think that there was a mistaken characterization by the EFF. They once said MK is enemy number one. To realize it was a mistake characterization. It's not possible for, just by the nature of your constituencies and the people and the interests and the politics that you represent, no matter how subjectivity overwhelms you, there are certain characterizations that cannot be true. No matter how you think of certain individuals in terms of their politics and posture, you have to be able to distinguish as a revolutionary between opponents, between potential strategic allies, and enemy forces. Like, despite the fact, like we know as Mkhonto sees it, that the ANC is largely in the hands of enemy forces now in terms of its ideological disposition. That is why they've got no problem associating with the enemy forces and forming a government with them, and giving them strategic departments of basic education, of land. But we despite the fact that we know that they are in bed with enemy forces, we didn't characterize the African National Congress as an enemy force. We said it's a contested opponent. And I would think that this is the characterization that should occur in all political parties and must happen at a much more matured political and ideological way, which is not guided by subjectivity and overwhelmed by personal dispositions and wrong view. Because if you allow that to overwhelm you, you will mischaracterize the juncture which we are in, and then you will therefore mischaracterize just what is to be done by common action of all the progressive forces. Now, the United States of America has increased tariffs not only for South Africa, but for almost all countries in the world. And what Mr. Trump is doing is saying he calls those reciprocal tariffs, that is retaliatory tariffs, like he's doing those tariffs in retaliation, that if you have been charging the American economy certain tariffs to gain access to your market, you are going to be charged for you to gain access to the American market. So South Africa is particularly affected because from the year 2000, South Africa was beneficiary of the African Growth and Opportunities Act, which was a legislation in the American Congress or Parliament to allow countries in sub-Saharan Africa to take goods and products into the American market without paying any tariffs, without paying any taxes as on when those goods enter the American market. So for a very long time, there's been some relationship with South Africa got to benefit from through AGOA, which now is coming to an end because there's a 30% taxes that are being imposed on South African goods and products. But we need to also, as a political movement, examine just who had been the beneficiaries of the AGOA process since enactment in 2000. Largely, it has been the automobile industry, Comrade Chairperson. So you'll find these European companies like VW, and then the Japanese with Toyota, and then the Americans with Ford will come and assemble cars here in South Africa so that they can get duty-free access to the American market. That is what, so 30% of the AGOA benefits has been accruing to the over-subsidized automobile industry in South Africa. And where they will just come and assemble cars so that they can gain free access to the American market. And then the second category of that was something called ferroalloys, and then agricultural products, citrus, and all of those things. So we said it before that in the process of hyper-nationalism and trying to appear relevant, Elon Musk is going to affect his people, because the people who are benefiting from access to the American market is in the commercial agriculture, and the commercial agriculture in South Africa is 99% white and mostly Afrikaners. They are the first victims. We can't say, no, what about workers? Farm workers are treated like slaves. They're not benefiting anything. There's no farm worker who is benefiting anything from the farms that they're working in. They're treated like slaves. So the biggest victim of the hyper-nationalism and racism of Elon Musk and his friend Donald Trump will be the Afrikaner people whom he says are under siege. Now they're going to be in bigger trouble with this increase of the tariffs that is imposed on South Africa. But I think the most important observation that we have to make is that for a very long time now, America, through what is called the Washington Consensus, has been the number one preacher, archbishop of neoliberalism, which says that please don't put tariffs on goods and products that must come into your countries. Now, because there's a shift in the global balance of power, with China rising with proper manufacturing capacity and producing meaningful goods and products, the Americans are the ones who are turning around to opt for what they call protectionism, of protecting their market against imports from other parts of the world. So it means the Washington Consensus is coming to an end, or is collapsing. American imperialism and neoliberalism is beginning to come to an end. There is, however, foolishness in the manner in which it's being handled, because it's just blanket increase of tariffs, even on things which America cannot domestically produce. I mean, how do you increase tariffs on fruits and nuts, which you cannot grow in your own country? What that will have is just inflationary consequences on the American population, where those will just become more expensive, and you cannot alternatively produce them. But as an instrument of industrialization, that is what it's trying to do, with the hope that Americans are going to domestically produce their own goods and services. And by the way, in the last issue to then reflect on this, is that part of the things that America is importing from China, Vietnam, and all these other countries are done by American companies in those countries. Apple, for instance, manufactures these laptops of Apple and cell phones in China. They say it's made, even at the back of the iPhone, it's written made in California but produced in China, manufactured in China. So he must go and fight with those people of Apple. He must fight with his friend Elon Musk, because even Tesla cars, the batteries are made in China. These electric vehicles, batteries are made in China. So there is some levels of folly and foolishness in terms of how the tariffs are imposed in what happens. But what we should, all of us as the progressive global left and global south, appreciate is that the forced neoliberal agenda and forced trade liberalization, which was imposed on behalf of America by the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, is going to come to an end. Countries are going to be able to develop their own industrial policies and set their own tariffs without being bullied by an American unipolar hegemony which existed for a long time. But in history, America has always tried to use tariffs for its own subjective purposes. But now we're in a different environment. There won't be any wisdom in trying to isolate South Africa from international trade. The call and the demand of Umkhonto weSizwe is that let's intensify our relations with the BRICS countries. If anything, the relations with the West must not mean anything because they've got neo-colonial and imperialist aspirations, which we must not be beholden to as a people. Our friends have got proper and large markets. The countries in the BRICS plus bloc have got larger economy, larger population than the G7, than the rest of the world in terms of the strength that we have. If you have got 1.4 billion people in India, 1.5 in China,